Okay, so I thought I'd make a short video because I have a grid tie solar system, small solar system, and I was curious about um, the way the grid tie function worked. So when the power is available on uh, the grid tie inverter detects that and basically dumps power into the grid when the house is not taking, when there's no load in the house. So basically the grid is kind of like the backup load. The house kind of has priority. The power is generated, and the surplus kind of gets dumped out into the grid, and that's kind of viewed like a load. And I had looked online and I saw some people who had battery systems, and I have a battery system also, a small battery system with a small 1,000-watt inverter. So the solar panels are grid tied, but there's also a portion of the solar panels that go to the battery system, and I use that in case the grid goes down completely. Then at least I have a minimal amount of lighting in the house. And I had seen online where, and it was mentioned a couple of times by a couple of different people, that they use their conventional inverter, and the grid tie inverter would work with the conventional inverter. So basically, the conventional inverter could be turned on, and then the grid tie inverter could be brought up, and the grid tie inverter would work with the conventional inverter. Basically, it would kind of fool the grid tie inverter into thinking that the grid was up, and so then the grid tie inverter would power up and start supplying current. So I thought I would try that, just to see how that worked. And I had a little bit of reservations going into it, because I was a little bit worried about what would happen when there was no load. But I said, okay, I'll try it. So I basically shut the house off. I turned off the main access to the house. And then, so I isolated the house from the grid. And then I brought the battery and inverter online and applied a load to it. So the refrigerator was running off of it, and I have an electric car, so I was charging the electric car at a very, very, very small current. And basically that worked fine off of the normal inverter running from the battery bank. Then I brought the grid tie inverter online, and I could see that the grid tie inverter started injecting power. It powered up, and it basically alleviated some of the load. So it started load sharing with the inverter that was on the battery. And that worked great, and I let that run for like, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 minutes as a test, and everything seemed to be fine. I could, on the inverter that I have, I can see how much power it's supplying, and I could see that it would drop down. And I could also measure the current coming out of the grid tie inverter, so that was good. And as the sun was, there was a little bit of cloud, you'd see it kind of vary and go up and down as the grid tie inverter MPPT controller was searching. It goes up and down. The amount of power coming out of the solar panels is not always constant, so I can see some fluctuations there. And then what I did is I started like removing load, and I can't remember the exact sequence of events because the grid tie inverter is in the back of the house, and the other inverter is in the garage. But anyways, I got to myself to a situation where I guess I didn't have any load, and I powered off the grid tie inverter, and then I powered it back up, and then I saw it raising the voltage and raising the voltage and raising the voltage, and I think it went all the way up to something like 170 volts, which is really, quite beyond like 120 normal volts. I'm in North America, so it's normally 120 volts, 60 hertz here. And what wound up happening basically is I went back in the garage, and there was just a plume of smoke, and this actually happened. So I've since replaced it. I can talk a little bit about that. But that is a blown 250 volt, 680. I don't know if you can see it. 680 microfarad capacitor. Now what's interesting is, now this is in the conventional inverter that was tied to the battery bank. So what's interesting is there were like 2 of these things in parallel, but only one blew. The other one seems completely undamaged. I don't know why this one decided to take off and not the other one. Anyways, I went online that very same day on DigiKey. I found a replacement part, and I couldn't believe it. It was at my door the next day. So this has already been repaired, and it's fine. I mean, what surprisingly, even after this blew, the inverter still worked. But I knew that this was gone, so kind of, I guess, probably wouldn't work well with a high load on it. So I wanted to replace it anyways. So anyways, DigiKey, thank you. Great job. Overnight delivery, unbelievable. So coming back to, I guess, the whole reason why I made this video is like, yeah, I think, you know, if you want to basically put yourself in a situation where you've got a grid tie inverter and you've got another inverter, and you know the power's going to go out, and you're going to do like what I did, either as a test or you're going to operate that way. At least with the inverter that I have, which is not a very high-end inverter, it's just a 1,000-watt pure sine wave inverter. It's by MotoMaster, which is like it's sold at Canadian Tire. And I'm sure it's sold all over the place in the U.S. as well as Canada. If you're going to do that, you kind of have to make sure that you have a load. And I'm not sure, maybe you need to have a load that's the same amount of load as what your solar panels and grid tie inverter would do. Now, maybe with other grid tie inverters it doesn't do this. It's a little bit better, but the grid tie inverter that I have, which is not a very expensive grid tie inverter, it just kept raising the voltage up and kind of blew this guy. So I thought I would mention that as a word of warning. I'm just basically don't have any other pictures or stuff like that. I'm just making a quick video on the telephone just to see if anybody else had any thoughts on this, or if anybody else had tried this. It was when the inverter went up in smoke, I was a little bit, oh crap, what have I done? Like following something that someone's done on the internet and trying it, and then there we go. But very happily, the inverter was working still, and I was like, whoa, okay, that's good. But I could, what was interesting, the way I discovered it is, it still was working, but there was like kind of oil dripping out of the bottom of the inverter, and I'm like, where the hell is that coming from? And then, it was basically the oil inside this thing, inside this can. So it was relatively easy to fix, easy to desolder, and easy to put back on. But it was a bit of a surprise. So anyways, if anybody has any comments or is interested in that type of thing and wants to, send me a message about it, that'd be great, because it was, I sort of expected that maybe something like that would happen, but I didn't expect it to destroy anything. I just didn't really know what was going to happen, but I was wondering, well, what happens if you have no load and you have, the grid tie inverter just, driving up and driving up? Like, I guess something's got to give, and in the end it wound up being this thing. So that's it. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found this interesting or useful or both.